Hello, my name is Jack Monti, and my research is on investigating hiring practices of the quantum workforce. So, quantum information science and technology, which I'll be abbreviating to QIST, includes quantum computing, which involves both the algorithms and the hardware used. So, an example of the hardware would be an ion trap, for example. Quantum simulation, which is used for simulating materials and also developing medicine. Quantum networking, which is used for secure communication through strategies such as quantum key distribution, and quantum sensing, which involves stuff like lasers and also measurement devices, for example, a quantum accelerometer. So QIST education over the last few years has been seeing a lot of development. In 2018, the National Quantum Initiative Act was passed. This was done to accelerate research and development for quantum technology by supporting education and research programs. And then in 2022, the QIST National Strategic Plan was done to support higher education in developing the future quantum workforce. So, a general overview of the study that the research group I'm working with is doing. We're collecting interview based data with multiple quantum companies. We aim to have around 200 interviews, and so far we've completed 37. We aim to have interviews with all different types of quantum companies and with companies all throughout the United States. These interviews are with managers working at quantum companies and also employees working at these companies. So, with the manager interviews, these are mainly a broad overview of various roles. Basically, the manager will talk about multiple roles during the interview, and we'll go into detail about those. And then the employee interviews are about specific tasks conducted by the role that the employee has at the quantum company. And to analyze all of this interview data, we're using a method known as qualitative data analysis. Basically, we'll have interview transcripts, we'll go in through deduce and highlight certain excerpts and then apply codes to them. Then we export the excerpts and analyze them in Lucidchart. I will show you an example of this later. So the research questions that I set out to ask were, how do employers recruit applicants, and how do employers evaluate and select applicants? To answer these questions, I went to look specifically at the manager interviews, where I would go into the manager interview transcripts and look for the responses to questions about hiring practices. I was able to find these by looking through our interview protocol, where basically the interviewer will ask these two specific questions back to back. The first one being, when you advertise for this position, how do you find people that may be good candidates, and where do you post job ads? And the second one being, what parts of the application do you find most useful in early screenings? Some examples include resume, cover letter, transcripts, and recommendation letters. So here's that example of qualitative data analysis. Basically, this would be the interview transcript, and the interviewer will ask a question, the manager will respond, and I will highlight this response and then apply several codes to this. So in this case, I apply the hiring practices code to it just to signify that this excerpt is specifically about hiring practices. There will be a role code to highlight which role the manager is talking about currently, because it can get a little confusing since they discuss multiple roles in an interview. And then there's also a code here summarizing what the manager is actually saying. So here in this excerpt specifically, they're saying that advertising is done mostly through networking and a job hasn't been posted for this role before. I try to capture as much important information while still not having it get too long so that it's easy to analyze later in Lucidchart. And then the same thing happens down here, have the hiring practices code, the role code, and then also the summary code applied to the response to the second question. So after I've gone through all of the excerpts and applied codes to them, I export the excerpts from deduce and then import them into Lucidchart with the codes going along with them. And then in Lucidchart, I create these containers and then organize the excerpts into containers to help answer the research questions. So, for example, I have a container named recruitment through professional network, and that's where this excerpt ended up. You can see here the codes, hiring practices, summary code, role code, and then we have this container as well for about mainly work experience, hiring practices, summary, role code. So research question 1, recruiting methods. Generally, both public postings and networking were used for the majority of roles. Basically, there wasn't a large preference for either public job postings or networking, although there are some deviations for more specific roles, and I'll get into that very shortly. So, public job postings specifically, this pertains to like a LinkedIn posting or a website or a posting on the company's website or also like Indeed. These were usually used for technical roles that were more oriented toward hardware. Some examples include like a quantum systems engineer or a systems operator. They were usually used to get a larger pool of applicants. This is either because networking wasn't really effective, either like because the managers or the company don't know a lot of people in the field, or because they simply just wanted a larger volume of applicants because the role is less specialized. For networking, these were mostly used for leadership and software development roles, such as a chief operating officer or a quantum theorem algorithms researcher. And these were mostly used to ensure that the candidates would have specific traits, these traits being like specialized work experience. Like the managers know that, oh, they worked with this research group, they must be good at this. Like they're able to ensure or basically guarantee that the employee will be able to perform certain tasks right out the gate going into a job. And for evaluating these applicants, they mainly are looking at experience. So the number one thing they like is work experience. This is especially valued if it's at a company that's similar to the company that the applicant is applying to. So if they've worked at a similar company before, they have a better chance of getting in. Also, if the tasks performed are similar, that's another plus for them. For technical hardware related roles, hands on experience with the hardware is very important. So, like, if the role is doing stuff with lasers or cryogenics, they want the employee to have experience with those hardwares, like hands on experience. And experience from education can also be helpful if the work done is similar enough. Like there were a few managers who would say like, yeah, if you're doing this in your undergraduate, then we'll just scoop you right up since you're basically doing the same thing already. The next thing was skills and knowledge. A lot of managers mentioned having broad or strong existing skill sets were great for engineering roles. They seem to like having employees with large skill sets mainly, like kind of engineering type roles. Coding is also a really useful skill for the software and also some theorist related roles. And then overall, a good understanding of quantum technology is really important because it lets employees have the conversational ability where they're able to either communicate with other members in the team and not sounding like they don't know anything, or because they're good at selling the product and stuff like that. Basically, if you want to get through an interview, you really need to understand the ins and outs of quantum technology. And the parts of the application that the employers were looking at the most, they would always mention looking to the resume. This is assumed that they're looking for the applicant's prior work experience. A lot of managers also mention cover letters because they show how much the applicant cares about getting the job. Basically, if the cover letter looks like it was specifically made for the company and not just a copy paste for every job they're applying to, that gets them in a lot easier. Although cover letters, it came up a few times, are less important for entry level positions, it's more important to just focus your efforts into making your resume look really good. And then also, recommendations seem to be really useful for higher level roles. Basically, if you're well known enough in like the quantum workforce, or like you have a lot of reputation, this can be really helpful for getting those higher level positions. So the interview process, this data comes mainly from the employee interviews. Usually there is an initial screening interview between like the employee and a hiring manager discussing the needs of both the company and the employee, or to see if you're a good fit for the company. Then these are followed by technical interviews. Usually there's multiple of these, and the multiple technical interviews are meant for testing different types of skills and knowledge. Basically, it's assumed that the resume employers will look at for experience, and then they'll actually test if that experience gave you skills in the interviews. And also for higher level positions, it was not uncommon for there to be presentations involved, where basically the applicant would have to do a presentation to a panel of interviewers to get the job. And then sometimes there would be a less formal closing interview, basically just an on tour or an on-site tour of the workplace and also getting to meet the teams that you'll be working with. So the key takeaways here for the technical and hardware related roles, experience with hardware is very important. Like I said, lasers, if you're working with optics, you have to have hands-on experience with optical equipment. Um, Prepare to talk about quantum technology in an interview. Employers are really looking to see if you actually know what you're talking about with quantum technology. And these roles are often posted publicly, so you should be able to find them on like LinkedIn or something. Technical software related roles, they also work experience is really big. You're meant to demonstrate your skills in the interview process. So basically, you have to come in with work experience and then in the interviews demonstrate your skills. Networking can be helpful because it was seen that networking was more often used for these types of roles, but again, it's not really necessary because generally they just posted public jobs postings and also use networking. And then for the non-technical roles, you need a lot of experience, and these were hired mostly through networking. That's because these types of roles are mostly like the leadership roles, like the chief operating officer example from earlier. That is all I have for today. Thank you for listening, and I would like to thank Dr. Benjamin Zwickel and Dr. Andy Pina. Thank you for listening.